to the first forum of this edition of Terra Madre. Before we begin, let me give you some technical information. The forum is a webinar, so your screens, your videos and mics should be off. So if you see that the mic and the videos are off, that's fine. We have the translation in various languages, as you've seen in the previous screen. To activate the interpretation mode, just click on the globe icon and please select your language. For Italian, you will have to select Korean because Zoom doesn't support Italian. The forum will take 1 hour. We will have 45 minutes for presentations, and then we will have 15 minutes for questions and comments, which you can submit through the chat function. So any comment, any question, you can write in your chat in your own language. I am also happy that I can introduce Mr. Marcello from Ausatonic, who will draw the contents of our forum. So he will give us a graphical support. I'm sure it's going to be very interesting. Without further ado, let's begin. And I'll give the floor to Francesco Sottile, who is an agronomist from the University of Palermo, who will chair the forum. Thank you. Thank you, Carolina, and good morning, everyone, and happy Terra Madre 2020 to everyone. We apologize for these few minutes delay in launching the forum, but we are all very excited and nervous in starting this dialogue, this discussion with the whole world, we can say, through this new version of Terra Madre 2020. We are starting from a topic that, in our opinion, is extremely important. It is the topic of seeds, of the regeneration of lands through seeds in a context of ecosystems and lands, which is that of the lowlands. The lowlands, as the presentation of the forum says, are often full of contradictions because they've hosted, and they still host, both an industrial farming model, which has proven to be a failure, especially when it comes to biodiversity and climate change. But at the same time, the lowlands are also the place where we find many examples of sustainable agricultural models and many small-scale producers who work hard every single day to produce their products respecting natural resources. The topic of seeds is very dear to our heart, especially because through the topic of seeds, we can talk about farmer sovereignty, we can talk about how to preserve seeds. We're also talking about the right for farmers to keep seeds, reproduce them, exchange them, and respect their variability over the years. We know very well that in the last few years, seeds, the seed sector, has been put under great pressure by industrial farming and by research connected to industrial farming through, first of all, genetically modified organisms, and once again, now through the genome editing and a whole series of technologies in the field of genetics which aim at genetically transforming plant varieties or creating technological varieties. Last but not least, to make matters even more complicated, the Nobel Prize that was awarded a few days ago to the two researchers who developed the genome editing techniques. They did much more, but that was the reason why they obtained the Nobel Award. Well, that Nobel Award is already being used in an instrumental manner by many corporations and organizations that promote genetics in agriculture. And so we are expecting a very complex time in relation to these issues. Now, starting from this comments, I'd like to give the floor to Erlich Frederiksen, who is a member of No Patents on Seeds, which is a, let's call it a coalition of several associations which fight against the patenting of seeds. And they work in this area with great determination. Erling is also a beekeeper, so he can give us a comprehensive view of the issue. Erling, the floor goes to you. Thank you.
Do you hear me now? I think it's okay now. Yeah. Thank you for letting me speak here. And as it was mentioned, I'm from the No Patents on Seeds, which is only 2 years old, the organization, but we have worked with these issues on no patents on seeds and plants and animals for 10 years. But we 2 years ago made it into a formal organization. Before that, we were just a network. But we now have members all over Europe. And what we are trying to do is to stop patents on conventional breed of conventional breeding of plants and animals. The problem is rather new in Europe, and I will later explain why patents has not been a big problem in Europe so far, but it is beginning to be a big problem. And as regarding to genetic modified organisms, it's another issue which we don't handle that much because the law in Europe is quite clear that it is legal to take patents on genetically modified plants and animals because they regard it as an invention. But the European law is quite clear that patents should not be given to or taken on plants and animals that are bred in a traditional and conventional way. So although a lot of us would be against patents also on genetically modified organism, or we don't like genetically modified organism, the main cause of no patents on seeds is to stop the ongoing growing patents on plants and animals. And I think, well, no patent on seeds make reports. They try to find where the patents are trying to go through. And I will explain why we are against patents. The law in Europe and most politicians and most countries in Europe are actually clearly against patents on plant and animals. But why is it still going on then? It's because in Europe, we actually have this quite clear law that says that nothing should be patented. And it has worked for many years without patents in Europe. The problem is that the big companies, the multinationals, they want to have patents because if they have a patent on a plant, they own the plant and they can decide who can use the plant, and they can make it impossible for others to use this plant. But the main problem with monopolies and patents is actually that these plants, the breathing of them, the seeds from these plants, you're not allowed to use. The European system has a system called Plant Variety Protection System, which has stated that if you use maybe 10 years to develop crossing and breathing a new plant, and it's take you a lot of money and time, then you can get a permission or registration of this plant, and you for 20 years mostly, you can get a license from people that uses this plant. But everyone can take your plant and go on with further breathing. And that secures some kind of dynamic. And that is what the patent system would stop. That if a company gets a patent on a plant, they can stop you from using the seeds and the plants for further breathing. And that's the main difference between patents and the European plant variety protection system. And the other issue, why is this going on? Because in Europe, you have the EU law, and most countries have a law against patents, but the system that gives the patent is called the European Patent Organization, which have 38 member states. It's not only European states, but these countries have made an organization which is called this EPO, European Patent Organization. This organization is not an EU. It's not a part of the European system. So it's a private organization, you could say, between countries, and they get their money, they get their funding from granting patents. So companies that want to have a patent on whatever has to make an application to this system, the EPO, and if they get through this very expensive process, they get this patent. And now they have started to give patent to plants. So they're using small loopholes in the current legislation, and that makes a problem because the EU and the Commission, so they cannot just say stop it because it's not an EU institution. So that's why we have these problems in Europe, that the EPO and the great monopolies, the great multinational firms, they try to get into these patents so they can have a total market control. And that's what we are trying to make awareness, that we should not have this control and totally control over everything in the plant market. So I would say, now we're talking in the slow food, that this plant variety protection system in Europe is still, for you have to be quite a big breather to have the money to get your seeds or your plants registered there, because it takes some years and they have to test it that it actually is this plant you are claiming that you have developed. But they are tendency or people work with that more varieties, land races, and these small local things should be able to be handled on the market, even though they are not uniform and very stable. They have this great variety, so they can adjust for new climate or new locations. So thank you for letting me speak here, and I'm looking forward to get some questions if you have some later.
Thank you very much, Erling. Thank you, because you have stressed the distortions that very often occur between the supervisors and those that must be supervised. And so in some cases, the positions are not so clear-cut, so different. Now I would like to give the floor to Alfie, who is advocacy officer of Mazipak in the Philippines, which is a network that works in order to strengthen biodiversity and the role of producers as a custodians of biodiversity. So also in this case, he will be sharing with us his vision from a non-European perspective, so a completely different point of view compared to the one that we have just listened to.
Hello. Okay, thank you very much for the introduction. So my name is Alfie. I'm working with the Magsasaka Scientifico para sa Pag-unlad ng Agrikultura, or MASIPAG, or in English it's a Farmer Scientist Partnership for Development. So basically, the Philippines is a rice growing nation, no? And for us to state it simply, rice is life, no? So it's a staple food for most of the Filipinos, and it has a central role to play, no, in most of the Filipino people. And basically, rice shape the life and culture of the Filipinos, and specifically, basically most of the Asian peoples. We have festivals, and we are always joking that any meal here in the Philippines without rice is called a snack. So a lot of culture has also developed in the Philippines. We call it bayanihan or collective work. We the farmers do seed saving to be sustainable with their rice farming, and it also supports diversity. Rice is also a political commodity here in the Philippines, and the government is really taking much importance with regards to the self-sufficiency of rice. But sadly, the Philippines is one of the top importers of rice. Rice is also uh, shaped by farmers. Specifically, all over the world, we have more than 140,000 accessions or varieties, where in the Philippines, it's about 4,000. So this amount of diversity reflects how these rice varieties are adapted to different local conditions, and also to the different cultures of the farmers who plant it. Combined with the diversity of these rice varieties are the farmers' knowledge to as their coping mechanisms to to grow these rice varieties. Farmers also do practices such as breeding and seed selection. Basically, the farmers, the seeds, and the environment are intertwined and independent. But sadly, beginning with the introduction of Green Revolution in the 60s, from commons, from farmers and seeds as commons, it's now being transformed into a private property. From sustainability, it is now being commodified to produce surplus for production of profit. And in the event and in the process, farmers are being alienated in the development of their seeds. The Green Revolution in the 60s, which is being uh, forwarded by the International Rice Research Institution, basically increased the rice production, but the offset in gains has produced a negative impact on the farmers. So basically, farmers are disempowered. They became no choice passive recipients of technologies, and their control of seeds are being wiped out, and the genetic diversity is being eroded. So Masipag, as a response to these challenges of genetic erosion, bankruptcy of the farmers, uh, the Masipag response, with the goal to improve the quality of life, they need to build farmers' capacities through self-reliance. Um, what Masipag did in 1985, because during the 60s and 70s, that was the height of Green Revolution, and basically the farmers are being affected, um, uh, to the impacts of the Green Revolution. What Masipag did is to basically organize the farmers, uh, as Green Revolution pushed farming as an individualized approach to farming, and then from an individualized approach to a collective effort. So these organizations became vehicles for the creative acts of farmers through capacitation and self-empowerment. What Masipag also did is to do a paradigm shifting of the farmer's leading role in knowledge generation, in the resources, and the specifically, it also engaged scientists and non-government NGOs to establish food security among communities. So the Masipag strategies for food security and farmer empowerment in regaining farmers' control to seeds we have five strategies. We call it Farmer Scientist Partnership, Basically, the scientists are doing the theoretical support, and then these are being the farmers are doing the practical approaches. So both are helping each other for the development of their rice. Bottom up The bottom up approach. So we could all of the approaches in Masipag are rooted in the needs and aspirations of the small farmers. We also do farmer-led research and training. All of our research and training are being done on site because the problems of the farmers are location specific. So we do these researches depending on the situation of the farmers to encourage empowerment and also building of knowledge. We do farmer to farmer mode of transfer. So it is the farmers who are exchanging technologies and seeds to other farmers. And of course, while we are doing all of this to regain the farmers' control to their resources, we also do advocacy work. Specifically for the rice program, one of the approaches and strategies of Masipag is to do trial farm strategies wherein a set of seeds are being given to farmers, and it is the farmers who will be deciding which of these varieties that they will be planting. No? Basically, these trial farm strategies is also benefits farmers because it becomes an on-farm seed conservation program, and also problems are being addressed on site. So we in Masipag we have more than 500 people's organizations. So central to the approach of Masipag is to empower these communities. And in these people's organizations, farmers are doing people's organization managed community seed banks. And apart from the collection of traditional varieties, we also, one of the developments of Masipag is also to do rice breeding. No? Possibly, the rice breeding that is being done in the farmers in Masipag is unique, no? And because this is being organized by farmers and participated and by farmers also. To date,
Grazie, Alfie.
Thank you, Alfie.
Grazie.
Thank you, Alfie.
Grazie
Thank you.
per tutte le
Thank you, Alfie,
esperienze che hai
for the
condiviso con noi.
experience that you've shared with
Masipag
us.
fa un lavoro straordinario proprio per
Masipag
la
does an
sua capacità di
extraordinary
fare
work
rete tra
for
diversi
its ability
attori
to
e
create a
di
network
provare a
among
restituire agli
different
agricoltori la
stakeholders and
sovranità
trying to
nella
give
scelta
back
dei semi,
sovereignty
nella
to
custodia
farmers in the
di questi
choice
semi.
and preservation of
Veramente un
seeds.
lavoro
So truly
straordinario
an
che mi dà anche
amazing
la
work,
possibilità
which
di
gives me the
introdurre
chance to introduce
il
now
prossimo relatore
the next speaker that we have with us.
perdere l'occasione di
And
sottolineare,
by the
spero che
way,
anche voi stiate
let me highlight, and I hope you are
come venga
appreciating,
fuori, diciamo, la
how
visualizzazione
we
che il lavoro di Ausatonic
can
sta
see the
sviluppando
graphics of all our thoughts, how Zatonic is
attraverso gli interventi
drawing all our
di tutti voi,
ideas
mettendo
and is
insieme gli
putting
elementi
together all the
salienti e
key
cercando
elements
alla
of
fine
the
di restituire
presentations that
un'immagine
we are
di
listening
questo
to give us a
forum.
picture
Un lavoro
of what this
davvero,
forum is all
davvero
about.
straordinario.
Congratulations for
La
this
parola adesso a
amazing
Tatiana,
job.
che è
Now,
una esperta di
Tatiana.
agricoltura
Tatiana is an
biologica
expert in organic
dall'Ucraina,
farming. She comes from
è una leader di
Ukraine.
Slow Food,
She is a slow food
fondatrice
leader. She's the founder
della ONG
of
Seed
the
Treasury,
NGO Seeds Treasury.
lavora
She
nella conservazione
works
della
for
biodiversità
the
locale
preservation
anche
of local
attraverso il diretto
biodiversity
contatto
through
con
the
gli
direct
agricoltori e la
contact with
distribuzione
farmers
delle sementi.
and through the
Prego,
distribution
Tatiana.
of seeds. Tatiana.
Искренне благодарю. Меня хорошо слышно?
Thank you very
Хорошо,
much.
да?
I can hear you all very well, and I hope you can
Здравствуйте,
hear
друзья.
me too, and that
Да
you can listen
здравствует
to the
Slow Food.
translation. Great.
Искренне
Well, good
благодарю
morning, everyone,
организаторам
dear
за
friends. Good
возможность
morning, Slow Food. I
рассказать,
would like to thank the organizers,
какая
first of all, for
ситуация у
the
нас в
opportunity
Украине.
to tell you a little bit more
С вашего
about the
позволения,
situation
чтобы
in
я не забыла
Ukraine.
сказать, что я планировала, я буду обращаться к записям, потому что информации много, а надо уложиться в 7 минут.
I have many things to say, and I only have 7 minutes, so I will take a look at my notes. Well, we live in a world with mountains, with wetlands, 42 million people. This is Ukraine. The city of Kiev was founded at the end of the 5th century. Now Ukraine is a great hub. 60 years ago, people talked about Ukraine as a country characterized by intensive farming. In the last 20 years, thanks also to the reform introduced 25 years ago, the economy of Ukraine has defeated ecology. Now, unfortunately, the natural environment in Ukraine is very limited, is very small. Ukraine ranks 139th in the list of countries that safeguard biodiversity. Now, what happened in the last 25 years? Well, we've seen a soil degradation, for instance. If you look at Ukraine from a plane or from above, about 80% of land is monocultures. The big agro businesses with huge investments prevents us from increasing the number of small-scale producers. Now, what does Ukraine produce in these monocultures? Well, we produce maize and other grains. These are our main crops. The plans of the green revolutions led to an agricultural boom. Once again, we see big investments. We also have programs for irrigation. So again, agriculture is in the spotlight. We have apple trees or pear trees, which unfortunately don't live more than 50 years. The fruit that we buy in supermarkets are tasteless. Farmers tell us that using intensive farming makes no sense at all from an economic perspective. So Ukrainian farmers are continuously fighting against pests, insects, droughts.
Чего не скажешь про растения в пермакультурных условиях, где вокруг много других видов, где устанавливается природный баланс и гармония. Урожай 2020 года в Украине зависел от погодных условий.
For these farmers, well, I'll give you some figures. The 2020 harvest has been quite disappointing. In Ukraine, scientists tell us that there's very little humidity, and the south of Ukraine could turn into a desert soon. In the Cherkas area, we've lost many hectares of harvest, about 35% less maize than previous years. If we look at the forecasts of the Institute for Weather Sciences, in 4 years' time, Ukraine risks seeing a significant increase in temperatures. In Ukraine, we've already seen an increase in temperatures by over 1.5 degrees, and water resources are being
Аграрий общается лишь
exhausted,
тогда,
small
когда
streams
говоришь с
have
ним про
disappeared,
прибыль, про
which
урожайность,
also
про выгоду.
leads to a reduction
Например,
of
за
biodiversity.
увеличением урожайности в 2 раза стоит максимум химии и
So these are
истощения
all the
почвы.
problems that we are
Если
facing.
организовать
Unfortunately,
искусственный
though,
полив,
when we
как они это делают,
talk about
урожай
agriculture
прибыль
in
у них
Ukraine,
увеличивается в
the
3
focus
раза.
is on money, the
Им это
focus is on
интересно.
economic profits,
Ни
rather than
международные
all the other
эксперты,
aspects and
ни
all the other
инвесторы,
problems.
ни аграрии не
In-
прислушиваются к словам специалистов по воде о том,
Instead,
что
we should talk about
Украина относится
biodiversity, but everyone is
о том,
only
что Украина
interested in
относится
profits.
к государствам с недостаточным обеспечением водными ресурсами.
Ukraine is
Пока
one
из
of
крана
the
течет вода, они не ценят этот
countries
ресурс и
with
ставят планы по
the
увеличению
smallest water
урожайности технических
resources.
культур превыше всего. И эти планы до 2030
Now that we
года.
still have water, nobody cares
Имею
about
надежду,
it, and we
что эти
don't
люди, работающие
think
в
about
таком
these problems.
агрорынке, одумаются
We
после отрицательных
have
показателей
programs
урожая в
until
этом году.
2030
К
which don't
экологам и
care
ученым
at
они
all
не прислушиваются.
about the
Но в Украине есть и
exhaustion of our
позитивный
water
опыт
resources or
уже
about the
устойчивой
health of the
модели
soil.
хозяйствования. Это органическое производство.
The
Это не
representatives of
многочисленные семейные
intensive
фермы. Это
farming don't
сообщество
listen to
пермакультура в
scientists
Украине.
when they warn us about the problems that we have ahead of us.
Родовые
But we
поселения.
also see some positive signs. We are
Оно всё
seeing
очень
the
болит.
development
У
of
каждого такого
organic
хозяина
farming.
всегда много вкуса, всегда очень много растений, большое биоразнообразие флоры и фауны и мало гектаров. Это всегда дружественное отношение к природе.
Small-scale
Например, некоммерческая
producers
организация
have
пермакультура в
very
Украине.
few hectares, but on those small
Это
lands they
84
have a
человека
large
со всей
variety of
Кто-то обслуживает
plants
5 соток,
and
кто-то
biodiversity. So we are
обслуживает
beginning
2
to see
гектара.
some of these
В целом,
examples which
примерно
are
это 22
encouraging
гектара
and
по всей
positive.
Украине гармоничных территорий, на которых работают люди. И еще около
We have, for
4200
instance,
человек
84
наблюдают со
farmers
стороны,
who
перенимают
work
опыт
on
пермакультуры
about
через группу
24
Facebook.
hectares.
Дальше. Органическое производство. Это законодательно регулируется в Украине. Под
And
сертифицированными органическими
they sell
технологиями в
their
Украине
products to
всего
about 100 consumers who
0,7%
purchase their products
земель.
through Facebook. In Ukraine,
Органические
only
стандарты в Украине эквивалентны
0.7%
стандартам Европы
of
по органике.
land
Около
is
500
dedicated
малых и средних
to organic
агропроизводителей
farming.
– это сертифицированные производители органической продукции.
About
Что
500
касается
small
семян,
producers are
органически
organic
сертифицированные семена
certified
для
producers. So, you know,
бизнес-аграриев –
these are
это
positive
соя,
signs, but the numbers are still
гречиха
very
и
small.
проса.
As for seeds,
Семена для
we
органических овощей –
have
это
soy, we
импортные
farm soy,
семена, в
millet.
основном Нидерланды. Иногда фермеры берут разрешение, чтобы использовать местные официальные сорта
especially
с обязательным условием, что это не протравленные и не ГМО. Про семейные фермы. Тут нет
seeds
одного
and are
решения, какие
imported
семена
mainly from
используют
the
и где берут.
Netherlands.
Чем уникальнее
As
предприятие,
far
считают использовать
as
собственный посевной материал некоторых
farmers
культур,
are
используют
concerned,
местные семена и ухаживают за
we
старыми сортами,
don't
не вырезают
have
их.
any
В Украине официально поддерживается
data on where their
государственный
seeds
реестр
come from.
сортов
We have no
растений.
system to
К слову
record or
сказать,
register where the
ГМО
seeds used by
в
farmers
Украине
come from.
запрещено.
We do
ГМО
have a
культуры в
register of
реестре не
varieties of
зарегистрированы.
plants in
Когда
Ukraine, but
крупные
there's
и
no way
средние
of knowing
аграрии
where the seeds come
выращивают
from.
ГМО, они это делают незаконно. Иногда делятся достижениями в социальных сетях.
GMOs are not
Итак,
legal
реестр
in
сортов – это
Ukraine
документ про
at the moment,
9800
so
сортов всевозможных культур. В основном это гибриды, первый, второй.
those who work
И
with GMOs do
60%
it
зарубежной
illegally.
селекции.
They are mainly hybrid
Очень мало в реестре старых украинских
plants,
сортов,
and they are
которым
mainly
более
imported
70
from
лет.
abroad.
Но они
The
есть.
national
И можно
register
официально
contains
оформить покупку со
very
всеми
few
необходимыми
Ukrainian
документами,
varieties.
как
They do
внутреннему
exist, but there are only a few. It is
зарубежному.
possible
Да.
to buy
Tatiana.
Ukrainian seeds.
Всё.
Tatiana?
Scusa Tatiana, però
Tatiana, sorry.
sì, purtroppo sì, è molto
This is all
davvero
very
tutto molto interessante
interesting,
ciò che ci stai
but
ciò che ci stai raccontando, però
unfortunately,
ed è bellissimo perché
time
si sente
is
proprio
short,
lo
and it's
spirito dei
amazing because
forum
we
di
can
Terra
really
Madre,
feel the
perché
spirit of the
ciascuno di
Forum
voi ha
of Terra
tantissime
Madre
cose
because you all have
interessanti
many
da
things to say.
raccontare e noi tutti
Because
vorremmo
everybody
stare ad
has
ascoltare
something
voi
interesting to
davvero
share with us,
per
and
tutto il
obviously we would
tempo.
like to
Purtroppo
listen to you
dobbiamo,
all the time,
a
but
me tocca,
unfortunately,
diciamo,
I
l'ingrato
have
compito di
this
tenere tutti entro certi
duty and
limiti
lucky duty to keep you sticking to the available time to make sure that the forum will be lasting for the correct time. But thank you very much for your speech, because you stressed the strong relationship between local varieties and the adaptation, the slow adaptation to climate and to the local context, to the environmental local conditions. So obviously choosing and selecting the seeds is crucial from this point of view, and the work that you have been doing to help and support the farmers is absolutely fundamental. Now it's also very interesting to listen to another speaker that is who uses the seeds, but also the products coming from these traditional, conventional seeds. And so it will be interesting to listen to a chef. And specifically, I would like to give the floor to Jordi Limon. Jordi Limon is a Catalan cook that can give us an important contribution on this issue.
Hola, buenos días.
Good morning, everybody. My name is Jordi Limon.
Quiero dar las gracias a
toda la gente de Terra Madre y
Francesco
already said I'm a cook, and I would like to thank all the Terra Madre and Slow Food people for letting us participate in this forum. Well, we have developed a small project in Barcelona. We have 2 restaurants. And basically, one day we decided to create our own vegetable garden already a few years ago. And basically, all the vegetables that we propose in the dishes of our restaurant come from our garden. And they're all ancient, traditional varieties. The seeds are the basis of the vegetal life, of course, and so they are obviously, they play a key role in nature, and we as consumers don't know how these seeds have been treated, or basically very often we don't know what seeds are we eating, because when you buy zucchini at the supermarket, you know whether it is GMO or conventional, traditional, because no one actually explains this to you. So I would like to briefly summarize and explain the differences among the various seed varieties for the outsiders, for the people that are not familiar and confident with this issue. So 3 types have to be identified. First of all, hybrid seeds. So how do you obtain hybrid seeds? It is obtained such a process that takes place inside laboratories. These are seeds that have been genetically modified and that have been altered through a process of artificial selection of traits. Just take a tomato as an example. So it should be round and have a certain size, with a specific taste, with a quite thick peel, for example. So I can select from these tomato all these characteristics, all these traits, and so in the end I will be making or producing a tomato which has specifically these features. So all the labs can select these genes, and they will be prevailing over the others. And so we'll have our perfect tomato and our perfect plant, and these can be patented. And obviously a trademark can also be used to sell this product. But the problem with these seeds is that if you plant these seeds, then the following year you won't be able to take the seeds from that tomato and then plant it for the following year, because you won't be able to grow again as it grew the year before. So basically, the farmers, the producers, start depending on those people that genetically modified and produced these seeds, that is the laboratories. Then there is a second category of seeds, that is the traditional or conventional seeds, or relics, as I call them, that farmers have inherited from one generation to another, and that basically are the result of thousands of years of of genetic evolution and adaptation to climate conditions. And these are seeds that are specifically linked to territories, soils, lands, and depending on the climate conditions. So throughout the years, these seeds have changed, and in order to adapt to the changing climate conditions. So, for example, let's talk about tomatoes once again, and the Samarzano variety, which comes from Italy, perfectly adapted to the local territorial conditions. So the farmers have been sowing these seeds for years and years, and so basically these seeds are handed over from one generation to another and also shared among the neighboring farmers. For example, in Catalonia, we have a similar variety that is called the pear tomato, translated into English. It's very similar to the Samarzano tomato, but with some slight differences, because it belongs to the same strain, but actually developed in a different territory. So these tomato exist also in Peru, that is called the Andean horn, but basically in different places all around the world, it developed differently according to the climate conditions and the soil conditions and other criteria. So this is something positive, because these seeds obviously cannot be patented. And so every year, the producers, the farmers can reproduce these seeds, and this is an endless procedure. And then there are the transgenic seeds that have been genetically modified by taking genes from other animals or plants in order to improve the genetics of the product. So I'll give you an example that is just fiction, but let's consider a tomato that we would like to plant in a very cold area of Russia, so that to make sure that it does not freeze at night, you can add a gene of salmon that is against freezing temperatures, and this gene will be inserted in the tomato to make sure that the tomato will be able to survive and not to freeze at night. Well, obviously, I don't now want to expand too much on this, because I realize that people have different ideas. But I will tell you what we do in our restaurants. Basically, we only work with traditional varieties for the reason I just mentioned before, because we do believe that depending on the industry and letting industry create your own seeds is a very serious problem, because this way you don't really control what will happen in your garden. And we can see what is behind all this technology. Obviously, the big industry is behind these GMOs, and these started with the Green Revolution, as a previous speaker already mentioned. So these seeds were processed and transformed by the industry, and originally the goal was to help the farmers. But behind all this, there is something different. At the beginning, it was fine because the farmers had better crops, everything was easier, everything could be mechanized, and the vegetables always had the same size, so they were also easier for transportation, so they were perfect because they could be fitted inside boxes. It was possible to produce vegetables with thicker skins, for example, so they could last longer inside fridges, so the transportation was facilitated. So at the beginning, everything seemed to be right, but the producers, abandoning the traditional seeds year after year, started to be obliged to purchase the seeds from the industry. So basically, if you set aside seeds that are handed over from one generation to another, and instead you decide to buy seeds from the industry, well, what happens? Well, the result is that you will be dependent on the industry, and so this is an impoverishment of agriculture and of the farmers, of course. Well, just consider that maybe 1 year I'll buy the seed at 1 or 2 euros, and maybe the price will be growing the next year, and so I will stop using the seeds, but I will be obliged to buy the seeds even if the price reaches 10 euros. So basically, this is the very serious problem that all farmers all around the world will have to deal with in such a situation. Okay.
Jordi.
Jordi.
Io
Sì.
innanzitutto ti ringrazio
First of all,
perché
thank you very much,
con il tuo intervento
because
hai
with your
messo l'accento
presentation,
sul fatto che
you
tutto è iniziato
highlighted the
chiaramente
fact that
con la
everything
produzione dei semi
started
ibridi,
with
che
the
in
production
realtà
of
non
hybrid
sono dei
seeds, which
semi
actually are
geneticamente
not
trasformati, ma
genetically
sono
transformed
certamente
seeds,
frutto di
but
una
they are
ricerca
certainly the
scientifica
result
che
of
ha
scientific
portato
research,
a
which has
ha portato gli agricoltori a perdere la
led
sovranità, diciamo,
farmers to lose their
nell'autoproduzione del
sovereignty
seme,
in
esattamente come
self-producing
hai detto
seeds,
tu, pur non
exactly
essendo
like you
geneticamente
explained, even
trasformati.
though they are
Su
not
questo, proprio da
genetically
quello che
transformed.
tu hai detto, attraverso ciò che tu hai detto, io mi ricollego
Now,
all'ultimo
building
intervento,
on what
quello
you've
di
just said,
Patrizia Spigno,
I would like now to
che
introduce
è
Patrizia Spigno.
un'agronoma
Patrizia is an
italiana e
agronomist from Italy.
ricercatrice
She's a researcher
molto legata alla
and
rete Slow
she
Food, anche perché è la
is a dear friend
referente
of the
dei
Slow Food
presidi Slow
Network because
Food
she's also the
nella sua
contact
regione, in
person for
Campania.
Slow Food Procedure in
A te,
her region,
Patrizia,
Campania.
la parola.
Patrizia.
Grazie Francesco,
Thank you,
grazie a
Francesco,
Slow
and thank
Food
you
per
all.
avermi
Thank you,
dato
Slow Food, for giving
l'opportunità
me the
appunto di
opportunity to
raccontarvi
tell you
quello che
something
sta
about
facendo la Regione
what we
Campania
are
e
doing
anche i
as
ricercatori
Campania
della
region
Regione Campania
with the
per
researchers
promuovere
of the Campania
l'agroturirismo.
region to promote
Noi
agricultural
stiamo partecipando ad un
biodiversity. We
progetto
are
che si chiama
participating in a project
Agrodiversità Campana,
called
che praticamente è un
Agrodiversità
progetto
Campana,
finanziato nell'ambito del
Agricultural
gestore
Biodiversity from
del
Campania. It
programma
is funded
strategico rurale
within the Rural Strategic Plan and it's been
2014-2020.
funded for the
Questo
years
progetto in
2014-2020.
effetti è un
This
progetto che
project is
in continuità con altri programmi
connected to
sulla
other programs
biodiversità e sulla
on
salvaguardia e la
agricultural
conservazione della
biodiversity and
biodiversità
on the
che si sono
safeguard and
svolti
conservation of
a partire
diversity,
dagli anni
which
90 nella
started
nostra
back in
regione.
the 90s in our
Per essere
region.
sintetica,
So it is an
uno
extension of
degli
those programs. I'll try and be
obiettivi
brief. One of the
fondamentali di questo
fundamental
progetto, grazie
goals of our
anche ad
project,
una
thanks also
strutturazione del
to
sistema per la
a
tutela dell'agrobiodiversità nella
structure of all
regione
the system
Campania
to
attraverso un
safeguard agricultural
regolamento
biodiversity
che
in
tutela
our
la
region,
biodiversità, è
because we
stata
do have a
creata
regulation
la
to this
rete
person. Well, thanks to this
regionale
infrastructure,
della
we've created the
conservazione
regional
dell'agrobiodiversità.
network for the
Chi fa parte
preservation
di
of
questa
agricultural
rete?
biodiversity.
Di
Who is
questa
part
rete
of the
fanno
network?
parte
Well,
innanzitutto
the
gli
network
agricoltori
involves, first of all,
ma fanno
the
parte anche gli enti di ricerca pubblici
farmers, but
o
also
privati
public and
che
private
senza scopo di
research
lucro, come la
institutes. Of course,
mia
these are all
piccola
non-for-profit, just
cooperativa,
like my small
che
cooperative.
insieme
And
con gli
together
agricoltori
with
custodi
the
hanno messo a punto un
saver
sistema
farmers,
che in
developed
qualche
a
modo
system
tiene sotto controllo, conserva,
to control,
moltiplica,
preserve,
diffonde
breed,
e
and
trasferisce,
disseminate and
valorizza laddove
transfer and
possibile
promote, where
l'agrobiodiversità
possible, agricultural
attraverso
biodiversity.
delle azioni.
We
Una delle azioni
implement several
fondamentali
actions. One of the
è
most important
l'azione
ones
della
is
moltiplicazione in
the
situ insieme con gli
in
agricoltori custodi di
situ
queste varietà tradizionali
breeding
locali.
of these local traditional
E questo è
varieties
quello che
together
faremo e
with the
stiamo
saver
facendo nel corso
farmers.
di questo
This is
progetto.
what we've been doing during this
Pensate che
project.
noi solo delle varietà erbacee la Regione Campania già
The Campania
nelle sue due
region,
banche, una
in
è
its
presso
two
la mia
banks,
cooperativa,
one
un'altra
is
presso un
at my
altro ente
cooperative, another
di
one is
ricerca,
at another research
abbiamo
institute. Just for
conservato
herbaceous
310
varieties, we
varietà
have
di vegetali e sono
310
conservate
different
più di
varieties of
400
plants and
varietà
more than
tradizionali di
400
frutta.
traditional
Quindi
varieties
un
of
patrimonio
fruit.
enorme
So you see,
solo
it's a
nella
huge
regione
heritage.
Campania. Un
Only
patrimonio
in the
che già si
Campania
è perso,
region,
sembrano
we've already
tanti,
lost
ma vi
it.
posso
I mean, these
assicurare
numbers
che
seem
prima,
high, but can assure
l'avete
you
detto più
that
volte,
in the
della
past,
rivoluzione verde,
before the Green
avevamo
Revolution, as
una
we've heard many
quantità
times, we had a much
notevole di
higher
varietà
amount
tradizionali locali
of
proprio perché la
local
regione
traditional
Campania, per la sua
varieties, because the
vocazione,
Campania
per come è
region,
allocata anche
given
geograficamente, è
its
una regione
geography
che
as well,
ha
is
praticato
a
sempre orticoltura
strongly
e fruttivendolo.
farming
La famosa pianura,
region.
quindi
The
parliamo di erbacce, la
plain,
Campania Felix,
the
che diciamo nota dai Romani
happy
fino ad
plain, the
oggi,
Campania
è una
Felix, known
pianura
by the Romans,
fertilissima,
is a
però
very
come già è
fertile
stato
valley
detto,
in
la
Campania,
stragrande maggioranza
but as we
del
heard
territorio
before, most
coltivato è
of
fatto
the
in maniera,
farmed land
diciamo, industriale
is
intensiva, quindi con
used
gli
by
ibridi che non
industrial
sono
producers
geneticamente
using hybrids.
modificati e che
These are
non sono
not
nemmeno fatti in
GMOs,
laboratorio,
these
ma
are not
vengono
developed in a
con un
lab,
incrocio
but
tra
these are
due,
still hybrids.
diciamo,
They are
popolazioni
crossings
diverse
between two
che
different
performano in un certo modo.
populations which perform
Il
in a
punto
certain
qual è?
way. Now, what is the
Una
point?
cosa importante che
A
noi
very important
abbiamo
thing that
sottolineato
we've
e diciamo che fa
highlighted
parte anche
over
di
and
un
over again, and which is
modo
also
innovativo
part
di
of
guardare
an innovative
l'agrobiodiversità,
way
è
of
quella
looking
di
at
non
agricultural
fare
biodiversity is that we shouldn't just try and breed, conserve and find traditional varieties. We also need to create a network with other stakeholders involving those subjects that are interested in biodiversity. So this is something that for us is very important. The network that we've created involves research institutes, farmers' cooperatives, farmers, as well as associations. Slow Food Campania, for instance, is part of the network. It has very specific goals. The aim is to create micro supply chains where, with the technical and scientific support of research institutes, we can solve the problems at all stages, from cultivation through all the other steps. If I am, for instance, a farmer who used to farm conventional varieties, including hybrids, I have to use my farming techniques to restore biodiversity. So it is important to support these farmers, providing low-impact techniques to help them. It's not that easy to turn a chemically treated soil into a natural soil. So it's important to support them right from the start. But then we also need to find the right tools to market these products. And then I will close because I know that we don't have much time. But this is all fine. I mean, what we are creating is a permanent system. We detect the varieties, we study them, and we register in the regional registry. This is essential because of all the things that you already explained. We need to avoid and prevent that these varieties can be taken by some multinational and then patented or used in such a manner that they are stolen from farmers. Is this enough, though, to say that agricultural biodiversity can become the future of our preserved seeds? It's not just a cultural or historical exercise. By the way, many of these varieties are also very good. We've forgotten to mention it, but from a point of view of their taste, these are very good varieties, because in conventional ways, farmers would breed good products because it's the stuff that they ate. It was not just about making profits and making money. But this is not enough, as I was trying to explain, because if agricultural biodiversity does not become a system, and as association, as slow food, both at the national and international level, we are not heard by politicians, that is not enough. We need to be heard by decision makers. It is true that local traditional varieties are better adapted to climate change, but climate change are so strong, they are so sudden, that this is truly unusual. They are becoming more and more worrying. So even our own traditional varieties are at risk because of the sudden changes. Also, another key aspect, agricultural biodiversity and biodiversity must become part of the system. They must become part of the food production system. Food must be traditional, biodiverse and sustainable food must become our daily food. It shouldn't be about niche products. We should talk about daily food. So I appreciated what our Spanish chef mentioned before, but we also need to work on communication and say and explain and convey the message to all consumers, to all citizens, so that they all choose local food. Very often local food is traditional food, especially in those areas where this is possible. I hope I haven't gone over my minutes. Have I managed? No, not really. You've used 8 minutes, but that doesn't matter. It's fine. You said very interesting things, and I'll give you another minute to answer a question that we've received from our audience. Just 1 minute, though. Here's the question. The network you are talking about, does it only exist in the Campania region, or is it part of a wider national network? The mic.
Allora, esiste in Campania,
Well,
so che la
it
regione
exists in
Campania,
Campania.
una funzionaria che poi
I
è
know
la
that the
responsabile della misura che
officer
stiamo
in
seguendo, sta
Campania
dialogando
is
con, a
talking
livello
to
nazionale proprio per creare
the
una
national
rete
level in order to
nazionale
create an
di,
Italian, a
diciamo,
national
di
network
tutela, ma non
to
solo, di tutela,
safeguard
salvaguardia, valorizzazione e sviluppo
and
dell'agricoltura.
promote
Ha un
and
nome
develop agricultural
particolare la rete in
biodiversity. Any
Campania?
name for the
La nostra rete si
Campania
chiama
network?
rete,
It's called
diciamo della rete di conservazione e
Rete di
sicurezza delle
conservazione e
risorse
sicurezza delle
genetiche
risorse
campane.
genetiche campane.
Ok,
It's a
grazie,
very long
capito.
name.
E la trovate, scusami,
You
l'ultima
can
informazione,
find it
potete trovare tutte le informazioni sul sito.
on the
Basta
website.
cliccare
So just
Biodiversità
click
Campana
on
e trovate le
Biodiversità
informazioni sulla
Campana
rete.
and you will
Così hai
find all the
risposto
information
anche
on the
a chi ci sta
network.
chiedendo informazioni per mettersi in
So you've
contatto con
answered
te,
the
con voi della
questions
rete.
to all those people interested in getting in touch with
Io
you and the
anche
whole network.
stiamo ricevendo
We've been
diverse
receiving
domande
lots of questions, and
siamo molto contenti
we are
perché
very
chiaramente
glad
dimostra
because
che
obviously
questo
this clearly
tema
demonstrates that such an
sempre di grande
issue
attualità
is
e suscita sempre
very up to
molto
date,
interesse.
and people are really
Ho una
interested in
domanda ad
it.
esempio per
One
Tatiana
question to Tatiana, for
rispetto
example,
ai
as
produttori di cui ha
to
parlato,
the
produttori che
producers
hanno
that you
scelto la
just
via della
mentioned, it is
permacultura.
the
La
producers that have
domanda
chosen
in particolare è se
permaculture.
questi
The
produttori riescono ad
question in
avere un
particular
tale
is the
successo, ad avere
following:
una
if
buona
these
rete di
producers are so
consumatori
successful
che
in order to
richiedono i loro
have a
prodotti.
network of consumers that ask for their products.
Un minuto, Tatiana.
Да. Таких фермеров в Украине немного. Это новая
Well,
некоммерческая
there are
организация. И они самостоятельно, кто
not
что
many
выращивает, старается
producers,
продавать через интернет.
and each
Пока
one
еще
of them
начинают
tries to
работать,
sell their
были
product
попытки
through the
работы
internet.
маленьких магазинов, через которые можно было продавать
So
такую продукцию в
gradually,
пермакультурных
the
центрах
first
городовых поселений.
attempts
Но это
have
пока
been made
разовые пробы
also
в
to
Украине, в
create
условиях
some
Украины.
local
Пока еще все
stores,
продается через
but
интернет.
actually still on a very small scale. But basically, all the products are sold through the
Grazie,
internet at the
Tatiana.
moment.
Alfie, in relazione alla coltivazione del riso
as
dei
to
piccoli
rice
agricoltori
growing by small
nelle
farmers
Filippine,
in the
ci
Philippines,
chiedono se
the
ci sono
question is
evidenti
if there
segnali
are
di
any
sensibilità alla crisi
clear
climatica, al cambiamento
signs
climatico, anche
about
per la
climate
produzione del riso.
change and an impact of climate change on rice production.
Yes, the Philippines actually is one of the top countries that are being affected by the climate change. The Philippines is being affected by about 20 typhoons per year. So we are being hit by typhoons and droughts and saltwater intrusion. So basically, the farmers are being affected by their production. But here in Masipag, what we are trying to do is to select varieties that are climate change resistant. So last year we were able to publish about around 50 varieties that are saltwater tolerant, drought resistant, and flooding tolerant varieties. So these are the efforts of our farmers who are doing breeding and selection. Thank you.
Grazie.
Thank you.
A Erling invece un approfondimento in più sull'organizzazione,
to
sulla
Mr. Erling
coalizione.
on the coalition, on the organization. People are asking if no patents on seed corresponds to the activity carried out by open source seeds. Any connections there? The mic is off. Please, can you turn it on?
I have turned it on now. Yes. No, there would be no direct connection there because we have a very limited goal is to stop patents. So I am on a personal level involved in the Danish seed savers, but no patents on seed. We try to concentrate on this patent issue in Europe. So that's our purpose. But I can tell you now, you had this national Italian program that in Norway and Sweden, they have national program so they have registered all they could find of old varieties, but this program is not, we haven't succeeded in getting this in Denmark. So it's more or less private people and the Danish seed savers and their gardens and a few people that grow grains that actually preserve old varieties and try out new varieties they import from all over the world and see how they grow in Denmark.
Erling, probabilmente
Well, Mr.
l'ultima domanda.
Last question.
Per la vostra esperienza,
In your
avete
experience,
segnali
do you see any signs
problemi legati alla
of problems
contaminazione dei
due
semi
to
tradizionali
contamination
da
of
OGM
traditional seeds,
o
contamination
diciamo
that comes from
geneticamente
GMOs or
contaminati da
from
poter mettere a
genetically
rischio
contaminated
la loro
seeds?
esistenza e
Is
quindi a
that
mettere a
something
rischio
that
la
can
biodiversità?
endanger biodiversity? Any signs of this issue?
It actually could, but there's a great awareness and the publicity of the people in Denmark, and I think in northern or most of Europe, they are clearly against genetic modified plants. So it's not legal to grow genetically modified plants in Denmark. They have had some small fields where they made some tryouts, but in general, they are not grown in Denmark at all. And I think in most of Europe, very few plants are actually grown in genetically modified plants are grown in Europe. But the Danish pigs, Denmark got a lot of pig farms, they get genetically modified soybeans from southern. So they are fed by these soybeans from South America. So they get a lot of food from South America, and we produce, or the Danes produce 32 million pigs a year. So they get a lot of food from there, which are genetically modified, but not grown in Northern Europe, as far as I know.
Approfitto sempre di te, Erling, per
I'll take the
chiudere con
opportunity, Erling, to close with just a small piece of information. A small farmer who is not lucky enough to participate in meetings like this one and to be part of a network like the Terra Madre network, and he buys seeds. How can he protect himself from hybrid seeds? Is there a way to see whether seeds are hybrids? How can farmers protect themselves if they're not aware of the issue? Is there a way to choose non-hybrid traditional seeds?
Well, the market is still quite small, but there's a growing interest in products that are biologically grown or it's called ecological in Denmark. So the state makes some kind of guarantee that if you buy this product with a sign, with an O with a crossover called Ø. So if you buy product with these signs on, they have not used pesticides or artificial fertilizer and stuff like that. And I think it's almost 10% of the food that is bought in Denmark is with these marks on, but they're not produced by small farmers. We have hardly any small farmers left in Denmark. It's very, very few. So it's big cooperatives or big farmers that just produce it in a better way.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Erling. But I also thank everybody else. I would like to thank Jordi, thank you Alfie, thank you Patrizia,
Tatiana,
everybody who's participated in this meeting and who have contributed to this very, very interesting dialogue, which has been quite exciting as well. We've received many questions, but unfortunately we have to close here. Before I close, I would like to remind you all that on the same topic we are going to have another meeting, another forum later on today at 5:45 Italian time, so 5:45 in the afternoon Italian time, chaired by Rita Moya from Slow Food Chile, and the forum will focus on the same topic. We'll have different panelists, different presentations. On my behalf, I would like to thank all of you. I would like to thank the Slow Food staff that is organizing these new forums and webinars in an extraordinary way. Thank you to House Tonic for his contribution with his drawings.
e che ci farà sentire tutti presenti all'interno di una stessa rappresentazione.
Makes us feel part of the
Grazie a
same big
tutti
family.
e
Thank you
buon
all
Terra Madre a tutti.
and enjoy Terra Madre.
Grazie a voi.
Thank you, thank you.
The future of our planet is decided at the table, in our daily food choices. What do we know about what we eat? How do we choose? Where do we buy it? You can make a difference and contribute to a future where everyone has access to food that is good. Eating must be a pleasure for everyone. We all have a right to food that is healthy, natural, fresh, and seasonal. Clean. Being aware helps us to choose food that is good for our health and the health of our planet. Fair. Knowing our food means making choices that are fair to us, to the producers, and to future generations. Slow Food has been working for over 30 years to defend biodiversity and fight the climate crisis by promoting good, clean, and fair food for all. Support Slow Food. Let's act together for the common good. Go to donate.slowfood.com/en and follow us at terramadreselunadelgusta.com.